Okay, we'll share my screen. Um, so, I mean, it's got to be addressed the situation over there right now. Um, I have strong hopes that it's going to be all done. The fact is, Iran has only so many missiles that they can send, and they've used up a lot of them. And the ground is really nothing there. So as long as this conflict is stopped, everything should be a go because there shouldn't be any long term ability. So we still got 6 weeks. So my hope is, as we get closer, and we should be ready to go. But we'll have to play it by ear, and then you guys can decide what you feel comfortable with. It's a little bit different than like the Gaza conflict, which is right next door, where that's a lot different than basically something that if they come to a solution or whatever it might be in the next few weeks. So we'll solve that. We'll plan to go
Yeah,
ahead as normal and see what happens.
there were two things I was wondering about that. One, trip insurance, if that will get questionable, if insurers will say ain't going to insure it. So I didn't know about that. But more importantly, since I've seen some of the destruction of some areas in Jerusalem, that if there may be some more areas that will not be accessible once you're there.
Yeah, it's good questions. Number one, trip insurance should cover your flights. In fact, the reality is most airlines aren't flying there now, and so they'll refund you the money. When a couple years ago when we were planning the trip, people had already bought their airfare, and when the Hamas war broke out, and everybody got refunded their airfare, it's not a problem. Other than that, everything I've done is all the money that I put out for anything is all non-refund or is all completely refundable to me. So basically, everything if somebody gives, everything's refundable back to everybody. So there's no, I don't do anything that basically says I don't get a refund cancellation within like 2 days of the trip or something. So those should be all right. Second thing, it's kind of like put it in perspective. Traverse City had, Chumps Corners, Menards had a missile dropped on it. Does that affect us where we live? We live 25 minutes from Chumps Corner. Not really at all. You drive by it and you'll see, a little bit of destruction, but that's it. That's what it's like in Jerusalem. That'll be like there. Very few places have been hit. I know the one place in Tel Aviv and one place in Jerusalem, but those things, that's New Jerusalem. There's New Jerusalem, Old Jerusalem. We'll talk about that a little bit today. And so that's not going to be really a factor at all. Only if something happened to the old city, and the likelihood of that is very, very, very thin because the old city is an Arab Mecca to go to, kind of not a Mecca, but a really third most
A
important holy
holy site.
site.
Yeah.
And so they do somewhat try to avoid, not that they completely avoid it, but we should be just fine with any of that.
Okay.
So, and infrastructure, unless there's some major damage, because Israel can block out 99 or 95% of the missiles, major damage to any major places. Even if they get damaged, like within a day, Israel has it like back up and going. It's amazing. Sometimes you can't even tell because they do that. But yep. But the nice thing is because we have our missionary there in Israel, that he also is abreast of anything going on directly there, so he can inform us of anything. So, all right. So we'll get into our study today. Really, a lot to cover, and I hope that this will be very informative and helpful for you because if you haven't been there, which you haven't, it's hard to fully understand. But let's get our map. Can you see our map here?
Hmm.
Yes.
So what we have, again, we have, the Sea of Galilee comes down to the Dead Sea, and here's Jerusalem right here. And so the day we're going to be talking about today is spent all in the old city of Jerusalem. Now, let me just exit out of that. So we see here, Jerusalem is this whole area right here. So Jerusalem's quite a large city, over 1 million people in Jerusalem. We're going to mainly be in the old city of Jerusalem, which is which is basically, if you can see here, I'll move the mouse around, hopefully you can see it, is this region right here, this area here where it says Old City. So that is Old City of Jerusalem, just a small little portion. Give you a little geography right here. This is the Mount of Olives. Over to the east or to the right side here is the Mount of Olives. And so this is the Old City of Jerusalem. This would be where the Temple Mount would be, where today the Dome of the Rock is sitting. And so we'll talk about those things. So that's where we're going to spend the next 3 days, a lot of the time. But this is a really important thing to understand about about Jerusalem, and I'm going to switch over here to this map. So this here is a recreation of basically what Jerusalem would have looked like a little bit after the time of Jesus. This isn't the time of Jesus because this wall right here that's on the top, that was built after the death of Jesus. Somewhere in the late 30s, early 40s, they built this extra wall. But in the time of Jesus, basically this would have been all of Jerusalem. You have the Temple Mount, and you have this whole region right here would have been in the time of Jesus. That's where Jerusalem would have been. And just to give you the perspective here, oops, I moved that. So if you look right here, this is where the current walls of Jerusalem are. These were built in the 1500s by Suleiman the Magnificent, one of the, we would say, a Muslim ruler, but there were several different Muslim periods or kingdoms that came in, even destroyed each other at times. But these current walls, they only date back to the 1500s. Some of them, like this wall right here, is where the Temple Mount is. That would have been similar. Along here where the Damascus Gate is, that would have been similar to the time of Jesus. And then around here is really close. We'll see that a little bit later tomorrow, or next time we meet. So the current walls sort of kind of fit into where the old city was, but the traditional city, or basically city in the time of Jesus, was going to be much bigger than what the current walls are. What we're going to be doing is in this first day is we're going to start out in Jerusalem. We're going to go down to what's called the City of David. Now, this map doesn't do it justice here, but this is a really important understanding. Jerusalem was not this size when David first conquered it. In fact, when David conquered it, it was a much smaller area. So if we look at this whole area here on the right of our map, just this region here, this little region here, this is the City of David. It's just a small area. So just the little portion here, and we're going to spend our first day there. City of David, basically that's when David conquered. Before I get into that, though, I do want to just mention this is another image of the old city of Jerusalem as it is today. It's divided into 4 quarters. It's called the Christian quarter, Muslim quarter, Jewish quarter, Armenian quarter. In general, these were designations given several hundred years ago because that's where the high population was. Still is somewhat today. The Jewish quarter, you'll see a difference between the Jewish quarter and the Muslim quarter. You'll kind of notice when you go in the transition between the two. It's one city. You're welcome. Anyone's welcome to walk in any of the areas they want. This is just divided in the area. The reason this one's called Christian quarter is because there's quite a few. That's where the Church of Holy Sepulchre, several churches are in here, monasteries, some colleges in this region. Armenian is also a religion, Christian type of religion, and they have some as well. So that's kind of, they're also on this street here, there's also some Christian organizations. So it doesn't mean only Christians in one, only Muslims, only Armenian. That's how it was divided hundreds of years ago. And they still have a division, though there's not going to be signs that divide it today. But we will be staying actually in the Muslim quarter. Right around here, we're going to be staying, actually it's right over here, at the Austrian Hospice. And so that's kind of idea. You'll hear the quarters. That's why it's divided up into quarters. Again, you'll maybe tell a little bit just where the shops look different in the Jewish quarter than the Muslim quarter. The Christian quarter, they look very similar. So it's not like night and day difference at all. It's just part of the old city. But what we're going to be doing is going down to the city of David. Now, this is a recreation of what the city of David would have looked like during the time of Solomon. The reason I say Solomon is because it has a palace. It has the palace here, and then it has the Temple Mount. So today's modern or old city of Jerusalem even extends all the way on these hills here, but this is the city of David. And just understanding this, and you'll get it as we go along. It was original Jebusite city, probably didn't even include where this palace was. It was probably even smaller than that as we went along. This area right here would have been the city of David. And then David built what's called the Milo, and basically built up ground to go to the Temple Mount for Solomon to build the temple here. And we'll explain that as we go along. So we're going to come down and visit the city of David. We're going to see remnants of what people believe are the palace of David. Now, there's a lot of debate on that, but we're going to see that. So the first thing we're going to do on this day is go down to the city of David. Just to give another perspective, here's the Temple Mount today. This is a picture, basically kind of a somewhat current picture. This here, this region would be the city of David, this little small area. See how it's kind of the same? There would have been, this would be the Kidron Valley. So the Kidron Valley would be through here. And then this is the Tyropoeon Valley right through here. And this would have been the original Jebusite city. If you remember the story when David and his men wanted to attack Jerusalem because David wanted it, they climbed up the water system. Right here, again, this is a recreation, so exactly what it looked like, we don't know. We're going to see those giant stones that are left from something like this. They built basically the spring came on the side of the hill. And so what the Jebusites had done is they had built walls around this spring. And basically it protected the spring and the water source. And David was able to, we're going to see in just a little bit, there's a cave David was able to kind of climb up and his men to conquer the city. So the Jebusite city would have been smaller than this. David expanded it to include his palace. Solomon then expanded it to include the temple of, or the mount there. When we get down to the city of David, we're going to have an overview. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to see this. We have an overview point. We're going to watch a video that explains the city of David, give you a better understanding of it. Most likely, this here was the wall that was built by Nehemiah. The reason they say this is because in the excavations, they know that at one time the city actually extended a little bit further out. But yet, when Nehemiah rebuilt, they didn't have all the technology or time to rebuild, so they just did what they could with the rubble that was there to rebuild the walls. And we're going to see a few things as we point this out, but this is probably the wall of Nehemiah. Let me just give you a map where this would have been located. This would have been right here. So we're looking from this direction up on top, and somewhere around here would have been the wall of Nehemiah by the palace. And so we're going to kind of see what remnants of the palace when we're there, and we'll kind of see that. It's hard to make out in pictures. When you get there, you'll have a better understanding. From there, we're going to travel.
Kind of near.
Go ahead. What's that?
Sorry.
Okay. We're going to travel. So we'll start kind of up here, and then we travel. We'll go by the walls, kind of Nehemiah, somewhere around there. And then we're going to come down to the Gihon Spring. And this is a very interesting thing that we're going to see. As I mentioned, this is a recreation of what people think like the Jebusite, the Jebusites would have built. The spring comes out of the side of the mountain. But in order for protection, they wanted their walls on the higher of the mountain rather than all the way down towards the valley. And so what they did is they built walls around this area. And actually, we're going to go through a kind of like some tunnels, like we're actually going to walk through the water system that was built by the Jebusites. And we're going to walk down, and we're actually going to see the remnants of these huge bricks that were used to build this kind of water protecting the system that protected the original Jebusite spring. And also they then would have used it for David's Jerusalem, Solomon's Jerusalem. And we'll talk in just a moment about what Hezekiah did. So we're going to have opportunity to see this. It's all underground now with kind of just a roof over it. So it's hard to picture in your mind exactly where it's at. But we're going to see some huge, massive stones. These aren't little stones. These are like 6 by 6, 10 by 6 foot. I mean, these are large stones that make up this area. And you'll kind of get the visual of how it went up this direction. And then there were also some water or not water, but channels carved out in the hill to see that. And then what we're going to do, so we go back to our picture here. We're going to come down by where the spring is. But what the Canaanites also did, so the Jebusite city before David was there, is along this whole hill, there's actually what's called the dry tunnel nowadays, the Canaanite tunnel, that's carved into the hill along the side here with little cracks that open up. Now, we're not going to see many of these. If you don't want to walk through the wet tunnel, the Hezekiah's tunnel, which I encourage everybody to do, you can go out through the Canaanite tunnel, part of it. What this was originally built was to be like an irrigation channel. So right along here, there would be an irrigation channel. So picture inside the rock here, with little slats open. I don't know how the distance would be. And what they would do is they would water the Kidron Valley below, and that's how they would grow many of their crops. This is a very hilly area. Crops and grain, not a lot of it grows in this area. So what they would do is they would grow it down here in the Kidron Valley region. And so there was originally a tunnel, and probably that's where David climbed up in through the irrigation tunnel rather than climbing over the wall into here, but we're not exactly sure. And when we get there, it'll make a little bit more sense, though it's a little bit harder to understand when you're there. So that's what they that's what they did. So we'll see some of the Canaanite tunnel. We'll go through some of that. We'll see some of the water system. Basically, that way people didn't have to go outside to get the water. They could stay, even they weren't in this open area. This was probably a little pool that was they'd have built to it was a pool to basically store the water from the spring that they would have, the Gihon Spring. Gihon Spring's very important when it comes to the Bible. Talks about of course, that's where David would have climbed up to conquer the city. If you remember, we'll kind of remind ourselves while we're there of the story of when Solomon was anointed to be king. They were near the Gihon Spring, and around the corner, one of the other prophets was going to basically anoint one of the other sons of David to be the king instead of Solomon. And that all took place right in this region, and we'll talk about it while we're there. So Gihon Spring, very important because it was the main water source for many years for Jerusalem. And that's where they would get their water. Also, we think of the idea, and Israel would have expanded, we'll see in a little bit, in the days of Hezekiah, Sennacherib and his army would have been down here, and they would have been down here around the city when they're yelling out to the people on the city walls, the story of Hezekiah and Isaiah when they're completely surrounded. And we'll talk about that while we're there. And so a lot of biblical references. Again, we go back all the way from the Jebusite time, which is about before 1000 BC, all the way forward. Because remember, there was a city here during Abraham's time. This is where, what was his name? The high priest when Abraham gave to Melchizedek. Melchizedek, yes. So there was some type of city here, most likely here when the Melchizedek, the king of Salem. Most people believe that was probably Jerusalem, eventually Jerusalem. So there was a city here that goes way back, but again, it extends to modern day. So Jerusalem's just so vitally important to so many different things, especially biblical understanding. So the city of David.
The orientation here? Where would be the east gate?
Okay, the east gate would be right up here. Can you see that on the mouse?
Oh, okay.
So this is the east gate, and we'll see this. We'll see it a little bit later on today, actually. This is the Mount of Olives here. This is the Kidron Valley, and the eastern gate is part of the Temple Mount. And okay. So we're going to see some of that. So that's the Temple Mount. So this is the eastern gate. So again, this would have come around during the time, eastern gate would have come around during the time of Solomon and after. And so we kind of hop around because we are hopping around a few thousand years. So now we're going to move forward a little bit to the Hezekiah time, because that's what we're going to see next, and we're going to see Hezekiah's tunnel. This is really unique because, again, anytime, as I've mentioned before, we can see authentic biblical things, I always get excited when we're looking at authentic biblical things, and this one is clearly authentic. Basically what it is that from the Gihon Spring, this tunnel goes, it's not a straight line, it goes all the way down here to the Pool of Siloam. So we're going to have the chance to walk through this tunnel, Hezekiah's tunnel, built by Hezekiah, or his men. If you remember, they knew that the Assyrian army was coming. They wanted a greater protection for their water source, and where it was at wasn't as good, and so they wanted to reroute it so they would have a water source and their enemy wouldn't have a chance. And so they rerouted it. It says that they started at both sides. There was a plaque that says they met somewhere kind of in the middle, though the plaque was actually found way towards the end here. You will see at the end of it that actually the walls are a lot taller than at the beginning. Most likely it's because trying to figure out the exact water depth to be able to dig a tunnel through this whole area several hundred feet and come out and calculate it correctly. It's still quite amazing to be able to do that. With their even today's technology, but in those days with limited technology. So we're going to have opportunity to walk through it. This is towards the end of it, so it's a lot higher. The ceiling is a lot higher. There are some places that the walls are very narrow, and you kind of almost have to, if you're shorter, it's not a problem. If you're like Fred, as he goes through, he'll have to bend down a little bit, being taller to get through here. But it's really cool. The water is about knee high. Depends how much water they've had, how much rain they've had. The highest spot will be right when you first get in. It comes up a little bit above your knee, middle of the thigh, but that's only for the first 10, 15, 20 feet. And then afterwards, most of it, you're walking ankle to knee deep through there. And it's completely dark. They don't have lights in there. So if you have a headlamp, not a bad idea. You can use your phone, just don't drop it. But we'll have a couple lights for the group. I'll have a couple headlights, just the easiest way to do it. So I'm always afraid I'm going to drop my phone in the water. But it's really cool to walk through. Just amazing to think that this was built back in the 700s BC, and you're walking through something that people would have struggled to carve in that time period. So we'll take opportunity to go through Hezekiah's tunnel. And then we come out to this area, which was the Pool of Siloam. Now, remember, it's been changed and built on for many years. In fact, if you look at this image and then see this image, this is the same pool, but this picture was taken in the late 1800s. So this is the same pool. You can tell by, if you look at these pillars, which are old kind of Byzantine type of pillars. Through this time has changed a lot. So exactly what it looked like in Hezekiah's day, we don't know. Some people doubt whether this was the actual Pool of Siloam. For many years, in fact, I taught and said that this was the area, the Pool of Siloam. Now, the Pool of Siloam is more significant in Jesus' day. If you remember, he asked the man who was blind to go and wash his eyes there with the mud in the Pool of Siloam. Let me just go back to map just to get us an understanding of where this pool was at. So this would be all the way down here at the bottom of the city of David would be the Pool of Siloam. And again, up the city of David, this is a fairly steep hill to the Temple Mount. So he would have gone down there to the Pool of Siloam. Now, many people think if you see these steps, that basically this led down to the Pool of Siloam. And for many years, and this is how Jen and I saw it for years, this area was blocked off and they assumed it was just a big square pool and this would be like a public pool. But they've done recent excavations and they're still doing excavations in this whole area, and they realized it wasn't a big pool. It was almost possibly even a stage. Some people say even a stage for water shows. Who knows exactly what it was? They're still discovering things here that change our perspective. So if 10 years ago you would have been taught this is where the Pool of Siloam, now they're not sure because they've excavated this whole area and they're still excavating it. And when we get there, we might find more information than I knew last year because they've been working on it all year. So we'll see this, and Again, this is all dug up now, and hopefully they have some more information this year. Then what we're going to do is we're going to take opportunity. They just opened this up. Jen and I have had the opportunity to do this a couple of times when it's not been open to the public. Really, they've opened it up, but not like a advertising it. But basically, we're going to go back up through what's called the Tyropoeon Valley. So if you look at this, this is a model of Jerusalem, the city of David. Now, again, they show it during the time of Jesus would be more of these bigger buildings rather than what it would have been in the time of David, a lot of smaller houses. But we come out here to the Pool of Siloam, and we're going to walk back up this area right here that is buried underground nowadays, and they've kind of dug it all out. And these are the steps that many people would have taken to go up to Jerusalem. They would have started here in this lower area, cleansed themselves in the Pool of Siloam, and made this trek. And it's all underground now, basically, but we're going to walk it. Some of these steps are original steps that date back to the time of Jesus, the Herodian Jerusalem. So we will walk back up there, which is kind of right this area. And we're going to walk back up to this region. Again, this is the area where the Palace of David would have been. At this map, there's no Palace of David because now we're talking 1,000+ years later. Jerusalem's been destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. It's been somewhat rebuilt by Nehemiah, but after that, it's gone through some destruction process. Herod comes in and basically redoes a lot of Jerusalem. So much of this was redone by Herod to make it more of a Roman-looking city starting in AD 39. So Herod then, his biggest thing, BC, I'm sorry. The biggest thing was the Temple Mount, and we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. So what we're going to do when we travel back up here is we're going to go up to the southern steps. The southern steps obviously are called southern steps because they're the southern part of the temple. Many of these are authentic steps. We're going to first come in this region and we're going to see this corner of the temple. Just to give you an idea, this right here is where the Wailing Wall is today, right around here. And then they've been excavating a lot of this at the base of the temple area. So to give you a better understanding, the temple actually was built kind of on a hill. And we'll explain this a little bit later, but this spot here is very low because it's the high spot on the hill. And then this spot here, they had to build way up. Herod built arches underneath, and there's a large retaining wall that would go all the way around the temple. And so what happens when the Romans came in AD 66, AD 70, destroyed Jerusalem, they knocked down the temple and pushed everything over the edge. So picture like a big structure here built up, like a big paved area. Everything's just pushed over the edge into large rubble and large rocks. And that's, let's see. That's what you're going to see. Let me drop down the picture. These right here are basically large rocks that were pushed down from the top of the temple. Much of what's in the base of the temple right here is still standing, but they would have been pushed over the top. One of the things we're going to see is if we look at this corner of the temple, we see right here, there's kind of a walkway with an arch, and we see the example of it here in this picture. So this right here would have been actual walls of the temple that would have existed, the Temple Mount that existed in the days of Jesus. And this right here would be what's called the Robinson's Arch. This is the base of it. So if we look at this picture right here where the arch is, this would have been kind of the top of where the people would have walked into the top of the temple on the top of the Temple Mount. We're going to get to go all the way down to the base of this. We're going to see the arch and the wall. So just to give you a better perspective, here's the arch sticking out of the wall here. Here is where basically it would have been the recreation. There would have been massive stairs, and we're going to get to walk along this whole base. And this is, again, is a neat thing to me because we actually walk along the area where Jesus would have walked. Some of this road here, this paved area, is where Jesus, the disciples, would have walked on the base of the temple. So another picture of it is from this angle. You see these huge rocks that would have been knocked down from the temple. You see these rocks. This dates back again to the time of Herod that he would have built that we'd be walking along. This here is the corner of the temple. The reason I took this picture, these are the Herodian stones. So these date back to Herod the Great, and these are very precise stones. In fact, if you look, one stone is just slightly set back from the other, and the whole wall is that way, and it's a really great architectural design to keep the wall standing, and really it has for thousands of years, and a very, very neat structure you'll see. So this would be the corner of the temple. This is probably also the idea that this would be the corner of the pinnacle of the temple. So if we look here, basically that picture was taken right down here. This area would have been the pinnacle of the temple where Jesus would have been taken by Satan when he was at the during the temptations, and says, throw yourself down for the pinnacle of the temple. So it basically be say, throw yourself down to this cement structure below and let the angels catch you. This also would have been the area, the pinnacle of the temple, where they would have made announcements for Jerusalem. So if we think about it here, right in the corner of the temple, one of the high spots to make announcements to everybody abroad. So that's this area here, the pinnacle of the temple. Then we're going to go over right here to these, what's called the southern steps. So again, we have a better image of them right here, the southern steps. There were gates that would lead up, and there were stairs in here that you would walk up and come out into the temple area that you would have. These would be like the portico where it talks about Jesus would have been here. The disciples would have been teaching in the portico, it says, after Jesus was gone of the temple. Paul would have spent some time here. And so we're going to get to go on some of these steps. What you see is some of these are original steps right here that go up to there. Now, I want to point this out. This has all been built afterwards. This would have not been here. This had been built by periods of times afterwards. You see they were used as fortresses. You see the little slots here for defending the city. So some of the city walls, this base would be original, but a lot of it has been rebuilt. So some of the things you're going to see have been rebuilt. And so this is an image from like the Mount of Olives. This would have been the southern steps down here. And I want you to get an understanding when we talk about the temple, this is actually the temple itself, but the Temple Mount is huge. I mean, if we go back to our map and we see the area of how much the Temple Mount takes up, this whole region right here, this whole area is the Temple Mount. It's a very large, large area. And the temple would have just been a small portion of that area. So this whole Temple Mount would have been a massive structure. And again, so what we're going to see from the stones, we'll see part of this. These are another picture. You see some of these are recreations of the stones. Some of them here are original parts of the stones that we see. So we're going to get to see that. There are some closed gates that we're going to see, but they're not original. They're just where the original ones would have been. They're just a real small remaining of the original gates. So again, it's not going there just yet. So from there, what we're going to do is we are going to go to the Temple Mount. We're going to get a chance to walk on the Temple Mount. And for some reason, I didn't put pictures of that in here. Okay. But we're going to get a chance to walk on the Temple Mount. So we're going to go basically in this region right here. Let me zoom in a little bit. There's stairs. There's only one way to get there. And I thought I took a picture there, but I don't think I have one. Anyways, there's only one way for visitors to get in there, and it's only open certain times of the day. So we're going to go, though, in the Temple Mount. We'll start in this area. And let me go to my map just to give you a better understanding here of what's going on. So if you look right here, I'll move the mouse around so you can see it. This is a walkway. This is the Wailing Wall. And we'll talk about the Wailing Wall in just a little bit. This is the Wailing Wall. These are the steps that we have to take. It's a walkway that gets up to the Temple Mount. Jews have just been allowed to be on the Temple Mount for a long time. They prohibited Jews from going up there to cause problems. They've been allowing Jews to come up there, which isn't necessarily the Muslims don't like, because this whole Temple Mount area is a Muslim-controlled area. They have their own Muslim police force, though you will see Israeli guards up here as well. Go ahead.
More of the reason they didn't allow Jews up there, it was the rabbis, because the rabbis didn't want the Jewish people to accidentally walk over the Holy of Holies. So it wasn't that Jews are not allowed by Muslims, it was more the rabbis.
Yeah, it's
not
both,
allowing
because
them.
actually the Jewish government didn't want people coming there because they didn't want to cause conflicts. For years, again, the idea is probably the temple would have been really close to where the Dome on the Rock is. And the Jewish leaders, the Jewish rabbis said, we don't want you walking up there because you could accidentally walk where the Ark of the Covenant was. And so we don't want you up there at all. When we get up there, we're going to see the Al-Aqsa Mosque. You used to be able to go in there. You're not able to go in there now. You'll see a lot of kind of neat little arches. These are like archways and stairs. We'll have opportunity to take pictures. They don't like you meandering around too much, and the security forces will be kind of pushing you along occasionally if they think you're in one spot too long. But we'll have the opportunity to take plenty of time up here to remember where the temple was. Can't do a lot of teaching on the Temple Mount. They're not really a big fan of groups stopping and doing teaching because it is a Muslim holy place. So we won't do as much teaching, though we will take time to talk about some things. Over right
Did
here.
that occur that the Muslims took that over as kind of their holy place?
Yeah, it's one. I think it's the third holiest place in the Muslim faith, and so that's a huge
But
place.
do you know when that occurred?
Oh,
When did it occur? Really back in the 700s AD when the original conquest, and then you had the Crusades.
Okay.
So you have the Crusades that go from the basically 800s to almost like 1100, 1200. Constantly, the Crusades would come, they would beat the Muslims, they would take control of Jerusalem, they would build things, and then the Muslims would come and they'd conquer the Crusaders. There was constant battles here for 300, 400, 500 years between the like 800 BC to like 1200, even a little bit later than that, really 1500s, between Crusaders and the Muslims. So it's a longer period of time. But I believe the Dome on the Rock dates the 700s. I'd have to look that up. I don't remember. That's a good question. But I think it's 700, somewhere around there AD.
I thought I read somewhere that when they conquered, or when Jerusalem had their independence, they actually conquered this whole area. But then when they settled on, okay, this is going to be yours, this is going to be ours, they allowed the Muslims to take the.
I
Yeah.
was wondering about that.
Yeah, in
Yeah.
48 as well as 67, two of the main wars, at one of the wars, they did take the Temple Mount. But because of
The 67 one.
Yeah, because of the pressure, international pressure, and the problems they cause, they let the Muslims have control of this in order to not cause other major issues. So it is a Muslim-controlled area, and again, it's safe. They have guards up there. It's no problem. It's their site. You will see some Muslims praying. Depends how busy it is, but it's not really that busy. From here, though, we will see the backside. This is the Eastern Gate. Again, this dates back more to Muslim time, the 1500s when the walls were rebuilt, but underneath these are the original Eastern gates of the temple. So this would be the Eastern Gate. Looking over, you see all these trees and part of the Mount of Olives to the eastern part. So we'll have opportunity to see the backside of the Eastern Gate. We'll also see the Eastern Gate from the Mount of Olives from the outside view. Maybe even have a chance to walk by it one of the times we're there. So we'll spend some time on the Temple Mount. And then what we'll do is we have to exit this way. There's several entrances to the Temple Mount, but only Muslims are allowed. They can go in and out whenever they want, but visitors can only come in basically through this area here, and then they can only exit out right here. So as visitors, we're really restricted in where we can come in and where we go out, but hopefully it will be open. Last time when we went to visit, they had it closed but that was during Ramadan, and Ramadan's a whole different story. So I made sure Ramadan wasn't during this trip because it's just a whole different story. But so we'll come out here, and depending on the day, there's a few things. This is also where the Lion's Gate is. We'll have a chance to look at the Lion's Gate. Not as much biblical significance, but from here, then we're going to come. And we will come out here to this area by St. Anne's Church. And this area right here, I'll zoom in just a little bit. This is where the pool of Bethesda would have been. So it's hard to make this out. It really is today when you go there. So we're going to see it, but it's hard to picture. But this is a recreation of what the pool of Bethesda would have looked like. If you remember, the main story in this is in the days of Jesus, where there's a lame man and he wants to get into the water because they believe the angel was stirring the water. And we'll talk about that were there. Most people, it's hard to know if their angel actually did come down and stir the water, or that was just their belief, because there was a water system when the water would turn on, kind of like what we do with jets. Like if you were thinking a hot tub in a jet or a pool, for a period of time, they turn on to circulate the water.
It was a sluice gate.
Yeah, they had a sluice gate that would open up, and they had a similar thing to keep water circulating and allow water into this pool. And so it would come at certain times. And so it's hard to know if actually there were angels there, or if there was just more, or that would stir up the water. It was more of a folklore that went on in those days. So that is in this recreation here. So the Temple Mount would be, this is the idea, the pool of Bethesda would have actually been outside of the walls of Jerusalem in Jesus's day. But yet they're also a second wall. So you see here, let's go back to our map. And what happens is you see here the first wall, the north wall, and then we have the third wall that was built a little bit later on. This might have been in construction during the days of Jesus. It's hard to know exactly. We just know from Josephus describing the different walls. But again, we don't believe that most of this was considered part of the city, this area, during the days of Jesus, but it was built shortly after that. So we're going to look here. This is where the pool of Bethesda would have been. And so we're just going to see kind of what it looks like. Now, today, it looks kind of like this. So it's really hard, but it was way down here. If you see where these stairs are, it was way lower, and things have been built on top. Has to be remembered, Jerusalem is way underground, the ancient city, because we've had years and years and years of building on top of it, kind of like a tell. But years of building and civilizations on top of it. So from there, what we're going to do is we're going to come. So this is where sometimes we're going to be doing a lot of backtracking, because we just walked all the way this way, which is like a quarter of a mile to half a mile. It's a long stretch. And then we're going to come back all the way back to the Wailing Wall, but that's because we can only go one way when you're on the Temple Mount. You can get in one way and go out one way. So we're going to circle back here, and we are going to see the Wailing Wall. And again, you have the Mount of Olives. This is the Dome of the Rock, the Wailing Wall. Now, why is this significant? For many years, this was the only spot where the Jews were allowed to come and to worship. This was considered to be the spot closest to the Holy of Holies. And so it's one of the holiest spots. And so for many years, this area here, there's a big platform now, but this was actually covered with Muslim houses just like this. So if you look here, these are all Muslim houses that are built on top. This is basically what existed here, except there was like a 5 to 6 foot walkway that some Jews, and sometimes the Muslims permitted them to, sometimes they didn't. Many times it was the Britons, when they came over, and they forbade the Jews to go to this area. And that's where a lot of conflict was, is it wasn't just the Muslims who were mean to Jews, because sometimes Muslims were very nice to Jews in certain periods. It was actually the outside sources, the Christian sources, the Byzantine armies, the Crusaders were actually kicked Jews out of Jerusalem. Many of the Crusaders didn't like the Jews. And this is important to understand, because many times we think the Muslims and Jews have always been enemies, but actually the Christians, quote unquote Christians, and Jews were much more enemies than the actually Muslims were, which kind of blows my mind because I can't fathom that. But that's how it was for many years, is the Christians are often hated even more than the Muslims because of what they did. And even today, Jews will still hate the Christians for what Christians did. They think that they did, quote unquote, Christians, in forcing them out and persecution where the Muslims allowed them to be there at times, not all the time. Went through several Muslim periods, and we'll talk about those while we're there a little bit. We'll go to a museum that explains a lot, so I won't do a lot of that because they do it in a way better way. But for many years, there were houses along this, but this was the place that they could come and worship. That's why the Wailing Wall has become so important. Now there's other places that they can get a little closer, but it's still a huge thing. You'll see bar mitzvahs take place here. It's a great place of celebration. A lot happens right here. This is the center of Judaism that takes place here in the Western Wall. Now we're going to have opportunity to go along this whole wall. So to get the understanding here, this is where the Western Wall is in this region. And much of this today is under the city of Jerusalem. All this that would have been exposed in the time of Jesus. But we're going to have opportunity basically to go and we're going to get to walk along. Here's where the Wailing Wall is. We're going to get to walk along this whole wall right here. Remember, I said it was built on a hill. You'll see then we'll walk along this hill where there's no longer a wall, but and this is all underground. They've dug this out and it goes down many of the places to the actual city of Jerusalem during the time of Jesus. So we'll stop and we'll go in this tunnel. It's a guided tour. They'll take us. Here's just a few images. This is a huge stone that would have been part of the base of Herod's temple, just a massive stone. They'll talk about how big this stone was while we're there, as well as this is the idea. There's a lot of arches we'll go under because much of the Temple Mount was built on arches. Herod used arches incredibly, and again, over the years, there's different arches you're going to see, and it's somewhat confusing, and they'll try their best to explain what is under there. So we'll have a chance to go along here. Very cool. It's called the Rabbi Tunnel, or the Kotel is what they call it nowadays. So we'll again then walk along the wall on the inside, guided tour about an hour. Very excellent information we'll find there. So anyways, we started out here. Really where is right about here is where our the hospice is we're going to stay. We come all the way down here to the city of David. We come back up here. We walk across the Temple Mount. Then we come back here. We go all the way along the wall. So a lot of circular motion here in Jerusalem on that day. And that kind of finishes our day off with that tour. In the evening, for those people who are still energetic, I will have something planned for after dinner. Walk around the new city of Jerusalem or something like that. We'll see who's energetic and up to extra things after we've done walk 5 kilometers up and down hills throughout the day. So that's really going through the first day of the old city of Jerusalem. The main focus of this day is basically the temple, the city of David, understanding the temple, the significance of that. Remember, this temple was built, originally it was built by Solomon, and then that was destroyed by Nebuchadnezzar. Zerubbabel came back and rebuilt the temple, a much smaller temple that eventually was rebuilt by Herod. So this is often called the Second Temple, though unofficially it's really the Third Temple, because Zerubbabel built the temple, but Herod built on top of Zerubbabel's temple. So basically it's called the Second Temple. Solomon's temple was magnificent in its own right, not near as big as but what Herod did. Herod just did something incredible, and you'll be amazed when you get there how big the structure is of the temple that we get to see. Again, here we see the recreation this would be kind of like from the Mount of Olives, and just the massive area from here to here. It is, I calculated the yardage, but I forgot what it was. It's huge. I had it on the map. But anyways, it's several football fields long, and so that's what we get to see while we're there. Just the day will be focused on the temple for that day. Any questions you may have?
Yeah, I think it's in Mark where Jesus has the disciples. I think they're in Jerusalem. The Jesus comes out of the temple, and the disciples that were with him went, "Wow, look at all these buildings and stuff." Would that have been like Herod's temple, probably?
Yes.
Or,
So
what would have been the structures that would have wowed them?
yeah, we will address that, but that would basically be this right here. They would be looking on this temple, which today we'd see it brought, brick and stone, but this would have been very, very elegant, beautiful. The temple itself would have been like a white marble image, and they're on the hills. They're basically on they're on the Mount of Olives, looking down at this temple and these structures that in those days, you're talking people from Galilee who would have lived in, just smaller little homes. And here they come, like when we go to a big city, for those of us who live more in the country area, and all of a sudden we go to a big city and like, wow, these massive skyscrapers. That's what they would have said when they saw the temple, because it was a sense of pride. Herod built it, but the Jews are like, this is awesome. I mean, this is a huge, massive, gorgeous, beautiful temple. That's something that was really significant. So that's the picture of the temple.
And it was new because it had just recently been built and finished. Was it even finished?
It wasn't
yet
even finished
in
at that
Jesus'
time.
day?
They were still working on it.
Yeah, and to think of all in the world too. I mean, it was world renowned because it was the top of, top notch.
New construction to be able to build it. So that's what they would have been looking at, is this. And this is where Jesus says, not one stone will be left on another.
Mm-hmm.
So picture this whole area just completely bulldozed off, leveled, and everything, all the rocks fall down. And we're going to see the rocks below, those huge rocks that would have been pushed off of this area. Eventually, what happened is Hadrian came. The Jews started to rebel a little bit later, started to build back up again, even though they were under Roman rule. In 139 BC, Hadrian then came in, the emperor, and basically razed much of the city of Jerusalem and destroyed much of the city. And he actually made this into, some of it was a trash heap, but they eventually made it into a pagan place of worship. The Temple Mount for a short time, basically trying to defile it. And we'll see some of the remnants and some of the talk of that while we're there. But that's what the disciples would have seen, is this magnificent temple would have been like, it would have been an awesome sight. One thing I didn't mention here is right here, they believe would have been the fortress of Antonia. Some people believe this is where Jesus would have been taken and put on trial. I'm going to say that he was actually taken and put on trial over here at Herod's palace, and I'll explain why while we're there. So you hear the term the Via Dolorosa. The Via Dolorosa is the way of suffering, the way Jesus would have been taken. They believe that, we'll talk about this the next time, that he would have been taken and marched, and this is where he would have been flogged and beaten in the fortress of Antonia. I believe it was over here in Herod's palace. But they had the Via Dolorosa, which we'll be on a little bit. It's basically from here until Golgotha, but we'll talk about that next week, because that's the path we're going to take next week. Any other questions? All right, so hopefully it's, again, when you're getting there, it's still more overwhelming, but at least you're familiar with some of these things, because in Jerusalem, you see so much. And then you have, again, 3,000 years of history crammed into one little area that you're walking to. And one step you could be talking about something that took place in 1000 BC, and the next step you talk about something that took place in 0 BC or 1 AD. And so it's really kind of interesting to see. All right, anything else? Well, we will pray for the peace of Jerusalem, and in a selfish way, we'll pray that things will calm down real quick, and that we'll be able to take our trip as planned. So that's our hope.
Oh,
All right.
one other last question. Oh,
Yes, ma'am.
Never mind. So this was a big section to read, so I didn't get all the way through it. So I was
Mhm.
wondering what page maybe day 8 started, but now I found it. So.
Yeah, you see, yeah, I gave a lot of extra for Jerusalem because there's a lot of history there, and for extra people want to read afterwards. One of the reasons with the booklet being so long, I know you're not going to read it or remember a lot of stuff before, but afterwards to recall, as well as once you read afterwards, it makes more sense once you've been there. It just gets more understanding. And I read through this and I don't remember it all, and then I forget everything, but I get a general idea. Every time you go through it, you get a little bit more understanding.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a great week. We'll plan to meet next week then.
Thank you.
Bye.
Oh, hello, Fred.